What's up? So as promised, guys, here is the first in the video series of talking about what quirks to lock. So I'm going to warn you in advance, there is math ahead, and I'm going to kind of explain why I came to some of the conclusions that I did. So if it's a bit dry, I apologize, but it's necessary to kind of explain why I did what I did and why I'm telling you to pick the quirks that I'm going to tell you to pick. So in our last video, we talked about, generally speaking, what the best quirks to lock were. Now I'm going to tell you per specialization, so to speak, of the hero that you're working with, what you're going to focus on with retaining them. So, retaining quirks for them. So we're going to look at two different hero classes today. We're going to look at the Arbalest and we're going to look at the Grave Robber as part of a comparison, just to give you guys an example of why you don't want to. I can't generally say, okay, you need to take Evasive, you need to take Eagle Eye, and you need to take Deadly. These guys can be utilized in a lot of different ways, so don't feel that what I'm going to tell you is an absolute have to have. Tweak a little bit, adjust it to your playstyle. I'm just going to give you some basic recommendations on what I would say, generally speaking, how most people play the classes, how I'm going to recommend that you utilize them. So to start off, let's consider what we would probably say some of the best for a range class would be. So we have Evasive, Unerring, Eagle Eye, Deadly, Hard Skin, Tough, Natural Eye, Quick Reflexes, and then I have two in there that are more utility based. Robust, which is to avoid or to have more disease resist, which you can already tell. If you guys don't know, there's a lot more diseases coming at your heroes this patch. I hope it gets adjusted down slightly, but currently, Robust is really, really strong to take. Now, it might be hot fixed where they adjust that, so I don't know that later on it would be a great investment. But either way, it can save you a ton of gold to have disease resist. Otherwise, you look at bringing a Plague Doctor that would have the cure in order to get rid of diseases. And just as an FYI, it says remove target disease, but currently it removes every disease on your character at the camp. So, going back to look at an Arbalest, so let's take a look at their base stats, and let's focus on base stats and how we're going to maximize her potential. So, we're going to start looking at her health. So, I'm going to annotate down in the bottom some math for you all, but let's consider that Tough is one we want to take. So, that would give us an additional 10% HP. Looking at her base stats, she only has 27 armor, or 27 health, as 27 HP, whatever you want to call it. So 27, you have the Leper that has 35, that's top end. 27 is pretty good. However, looking at 10% of 27, you have 2.7 additional health. So she's at 29.7 is what you would think if you break down the math. Well, some of the testing I've done shows that Darkest Dungeon is currently using truncated values, or values that are rounded down. So she's only going to get an additional 2 HP from that. Is it worth it? Well, we all know that we're going to run into those situations sometimes where you're going to be on death's door, you're going to have a bad time, and that 2 HP probably would have saved you from dying. But is it worth an additional... Would you take a 1% crit instead of that? I probably would take 1% crit instead of that. I'd also consider unyielding, death blow resist, more important than having more HP, and I'd rather manage Death's Door than giving her 2 additional HP. Now, that being said, there's different ways to play this class, so I don't want to say that to avoid Tough in general. But my point of that illustration is to show you that just because it says it's 10% extra doesn't mean it's always going to be really, really solid. So in that same example, let's take a look at the Grave Robber, and primarily, if we look at the Grave Robber, most of us, I think, would agree that 3 out of 4 times you're probably going to use a ranged attack, either flashing daggers, thrown dagger, or poison darts with her. So if we look at that, Unerring, for example, 10% damage to her ranged skills. So if we're looking at her ranged skills, her base damage is 4 to 7. So 10% of 7, 0.7, we already said it's truncated, it's going to be rounded down. Now, mind you, if you crit, you're going to get when you crit in Darkest Dungeon, currently the way it works is you get max damage, so let's say 7. and then you're going to get time and a half on that, so an additional 3.5. So that would be 10 damage if you crit. Now, we all know it's much more difficult to crit than it is just to have more top end damage. And there's all kinds of other variables. I'm sure somebody's going to say, well, you didn't break down accuracy base, you didn't break down considering the damage mods. I'm not going to do all that in this video. I will in a video in the future. But all I'm trying to get you guys to realize is that you want to make sure you take a look at what attacks you use primarily, look at what their crit mod or damage mod is, look at what the base weapon damage is before you consider taking generalizations of 10% health is awesome, 10% in damage is awesome. Break down the math and think about it before you make that decision. So that being said, Damp, what the hell? It's 5 minutes into the video. You didn't tell me what to take yet. So for the Grave Robber, my recommendations are going to be Evasive. Here's why. Evasive, 10 dodge base at level 1, 0, and 2. Or level 0, 1, 2, sorry. 10 dodge base. If we look at dodge in general, if you had Evasive, that would be 15. That's pretty good. You're really going to want to focus on their strengths and not really try to minimize on the weaknesses. I find that it's more effective in Darkest Dungeon to be more offense and less defense. I don't stun. I prefer damage over stuns in most situations, 90% of them. Now, if we look at the Arbalest in comparison, dodge is 0. I'm not going to waste Evasive on something that's not really one of her strengths. Whereas if you look at the Grave Robber, really the Jester, and this one already has Evasive, at 15, and the Houndmaster at 15, and as far as the base stats, are some of the only ones I'd really say that were better than the Grave Robber. So we're going to take Evasive. We're going to take Eagle Eye to get the range crit, because primarily when I play I'm going to be using Flashing Daggers, Poison Darts, but more importantly, look at the crit mod here for Thrown Dagger. It hits 3 of the 4 rows for the preferred target. 3 of the 4 rows. Its crit mod is 10%. Then we're going to put an additional 3% on that with Eagle Eye. And then we have the option to either take Deadly, which could be good, or Natural Eye, depending on if she suffers from accuracy woes. That's going to depend on your trinkets, guys. I personally would say you're going to get trinkets that are going to offset accuracy. Take crit as much as you can. It's a lot harder to find crit trinkets outside of the focus ring than it is to find accuracy trinkets. And here's an example. I have 1 crit stone currently, and yes, this is all RNG, I know. But if you look, there's accuracy stones, there's the warrior's cap, and I know it's not ranged, but you have the archer's ring that can help to offset accuracy. So I personally prefer crit over accuracy when you're looking at things to consider for quirks. So that's an example for the Grave Robber, what we're taking. So again, Evasive, Eagle Eye. I'll probably take Deadly. You could also take Natural Eye. You could take quick Reflexes. It just depends on how you play. But I'm going to stack crit. So I'm going to take Eagle Eye, Evasive, and Deadly. That's what I would take on my Grave Robber. Now looking at, let's say we look at an Arbalest. Arbalest, I'm going to recommend that we don't necessarily do the same thing, but we're definitely going to take Eagle Eye. That's a no-brainer. Because she's in the 4th row, I think Prot is something to consider with Hard Skinned, because you have those mobs that are going to be Quarrel. You have those mobs that can crit back row fairly easily. Quarrel can be really brutal late game. You guys probably already know that if you're doing champion runs, but my recommendations are going to be currently, again, Eagle Eye, Deadly, and I'm going to take Unerring because at top end, if you look at some of the damage she can do, and I know that's only 4 to 9 there, but when she crits, you can see here 50% damage versus a marked target. On a marked target, and especially on a boss, Unerring is extremely beneficial, so that's what I would tell you to take. So, again, I'm more offensive, so I'm taking Unerring, I'm taking Eagle Eye, and I'm either going to take Deadly or Natural Eye, depending on, again, party composition, things like that. But I'm not taking Evasive. I'm avoiding Tough and Hard Skin, even though they are things to consider. Also, don't forget Unyielding. Late game is going to be really good. And Robust can save you some money if you have some disease issues, like you can already tell this one does. And you don't really want to bring Plague Doctors. So I'm trying to keep it under about 10 minutes to give you guys an explanation. That I'm going to put some annotations in the bottom that kind of explain the math and how I broke it down. Hopefully that was helpful to you. Next one that's going to come up is we're going to talk a little bit more about melee characters and what quirks I recommend there. Thank you for watching. See ya.